feeling like a shark in a shrimp tank. Big fish, small pond in the shrimp tank.
Hey, everybody, good evening, and welcome to a special edition of the Shrimp Tank. Normally, we're in our studios in Alpharetta or at the iHeart Studios or floating around, but today we are super excited. We're part of a sponsorship here for the Teach for America Shark Tank event, which is at the Loudermilk Conference Center downtown, and so Lee and myself are super excited to be here today. We're going to interview a number of entrepreneurs today. We don't often get to be on the road doing this, so I'm pretty excited, Lee, to do this today.
Yeah, Ted, it's wonderful. I want to give a shout out to our producer, Luke Hudson, who has built the studio, the portable studio. It takes a lot of work, and we just walk in. Magically, it looks amazing.
Luke, you did a great job. We're going to take you to Sizzler later. Have you ever been to Sizzler, Luke?
Never been.
There's not much at Sizzler. They used to have a buffet. Did you not go as a kid?
Yeah, you're talking Jersey.
Like Ponderosa, Golden
Jersey.
Corral.
Golden Corral. I was going to say Sizzler and Red Lobster.
We're going to Sizzler. We're going to Sizzler.
And then it'd be a little piece of steak sizzling on the platter.
It was good stuff,
Absolutely.
But we're always excited every week on the Shrimp Tank. We get to interview some of the brightest and best CEOs and entrepreneurs in and around the city of Atlanta and across the United States. The Shrimp Tank now is in some 14 cities. We're in Seattle, Houston, Boca Raton. We're all the way up in Knoxville and Charleston, South Carolina, and so many other places. Boca Raton is destroying it right now. Why is that? Because people want to hear the stories of entrepreneurs. They want to know, how do you go from becoming a wantrepreneur to an entrepreneur, or if you start a business, how do you grow it and make it very successful? As always, you can get all of our broadcasts at Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Spotify, or iHeartRadio. And we're going to do a bunch of video today. Make sure that you go to the YouTube channel, Shrimp Tank Podcast. We've got roughly 1,000 videos on there. Why would you pay for an MBA in entrepreneurship when you can listen to Lee and I and our guests? Why would you listen to the Burt Show here in the morning when you're in the radio when you can listen to Lee and myself and our guests? That's what we do. We're super excited today to have on our guest, Claudine Miles. She's got a master's in education. She's a co-founder of Restore More. This is a super cool topic because this is all about education, Lee, which in general in America, by the way, is a real problem right now, Lee. And getting COVID and people dealing with their kids. There's studies that I've seen. I just want to start out. I don't know if these are right or wrong. You're going to know better than I will. But they say that COVID may have set children back even a full year in their education, and that's going to have a major impact on society. We haven't seen it yet. It's like a boomerang effect. Is there any truth to that?
I would say there's absolutely truth to that. Anytime students are missing quality instruction and their entire worlds are halted along with their parents, we're going to see some dips in assessments. However, I think there are so many pressing things that need to occur before we just rush and cram education down the throats of our children. Like, there's been a lot of impacts from them being home, not being with their friends, not engaging with their peers. And so there has to be a balance of remediating what they have missed, but then also ensuring like they're happy and healthy and whole. Their social emotional
Where did
health
you
is
come
really
up with this
important.
concept of Restore More? Where was the germination of this? Because you started the business pre-COVID.
Yep.
It exploded during COVID. Where did you come up with this idea?
So essentially, I was a dean of restorative practices down the way at a middle school in
That sounds fancy.
It was fancy. On the west side of Atlanta. I had been there for a decade. I was a science teacher. I had started the gifted program. And then one day my boss was like, we're going to this training because this is you. And I was like, what are you talking about, crazy man? But I'll follow you. Let's go. And it's like free lunch from the training people, right? So I went, and then I was like, wait, this is me. Like, restorative practices is all about restoring humanity and not allowing people to think that they are the sum total of their faults, that if you make a mistake, there's actually redemption on the other side if you are intentional and you're meaningful. And so I was like, oh, I love this. And ultimately, I came back to the school and implemented a restorative practice program with our students and staff and parents to decrease our suspension numbers. And so in our 1 year of implementing, we saw suspensions drop over 27%. So it was working.
Well, something you said, Claudine, it was interesting. We speak about, possibly COVID put the educational piece in school back a year. But I was going to jump in, and you started to speak on it, the socialization piece. I feel that school and education isn't just about learning, but it's also learning how to work with other people, other students. As a young student, you're working in different socioeconomic backgrounds. You're with other students, different genders. It's really not just what am I learning in history and math. The value almost sometimes feels more than 51% to me. That socialization was lost. But bringing it back, how does it tie into your business?
That's exactly like the intersection that we sit at, right? So I absolutely believe academics is incredibly important, right? But it's probably about 49% academics, 51% character.
See, I'm already in love with this girl. Her percentages
you hit
broke
the
out
intersection right there.
Yeah, right. I mean, I made that
I was
up,
going to
and you
say
really
something
felt that.
worsely,
Well,
but I'm not going to
mantra.
do it.
Okay, fair.
But think about it. Like, you can be a great person, or excuse me, you can be incredibly smart, you can be a genius, but a horrible person. So then you're going to use that skill set
Lee.
for evil. Lee.
The opposite, Ted. The opposite. I'm not highly educated. I'm looking at you with a degree in English, the way that you speak, but I'm hopefully a better person than I am.
You got a
intellectual.
master's from Trenton State, or
Yeah, I'm in Rutgers. I'm a Rutgers graduate. Rutgers Camden, where I grew up.
That was good. Rutgers is a
Camden,
good school
absolutely.
right
Camden,
now.
New Jersey. It's where I'm from.
We are not elitist. All degrees are good degrees because
Thank
they
you.
get you through the door to
I
the
like
next
that.
step, right?
I like that very much.
Right?
Absolutely.
But ultimately, like, our kids lost some academic gains, but they also lost major socialization gains. I think about my son who, when COVID started, he was getting ready to go into kindergarten. Imagine missing your first experience in kindergarten, taking naps and playing recess and joining the teams. He missed all of that, and he did it from a screen. And things got more and more awkward as he started to reintegrate back into school the following year. I was like, oh, wow, he thinks jumping off of things is appropriate. Or he thinks constantly being overly playful is appropriate because that was the way he played at home with mom and dad. But now we're in school. It's not as appropriate anymore. Or we saw kids with siblings doing a lot of play fighting. Makes sense. They were tussling a little bit at home during that entire year that they were online. So it's really important to make sure that we don't skip over that social emotional aspect.
Now, did you get suspended? Did either of you get suspended while you were growing up?
I'm a rule follower. No suspension.
What?
No, I never did.
Never, not once.
I did. Well, I did once because I was part of a massive food fight in my high school. I would say, for the record, it was a great food fight. I got people pretty good in the food fight, but
yeah, Ted, we're also talking
one
about
day of suspension. That's not that. That's not bad. Today, there's no food fights.
Yeah, because everybody's on their phone.
hear-
They're all on their phones at lunchtime. They're not throwing it out. Back in the day for us, and Claudine's not old enough for that, but we're not distracted.
You
as
mentioned
much.
this topic, and when I went to school, these fancy terms weren't there at all. Guys like Lee and I, we were in grade school, and people were like, "What's wrong with that kid?" But you have this term, this SEL that you're talking about, this social emotional health, and you train parents on this, or do you train kids or educators or all of it? And what is it?
I love that question. All of the above. We will support anybody who wants to learn more about this and continue to develop. But ultimately, social emotional skills are the soft skills that you need to make it through life. Right? Again, we can be a genius, but how do I communicate effectively with people? How do I resolve
100%.
conflict? How do I manage my big emotions? Now, I want you to think about the world today and look at a lot of the adults and young people going out and existing, and think about if those are things that they're really well skilled at from what we see. Managing emotions, handling conflict, expressing themselves. More often than not, we're seeing people easily triggered and getting incredibly volatile over small issues. And I implore folks to go back to the drawing board and say, well, we're not teaching this skill.
No.
So it's important that
why
we
are
do.
they teaching more social skills in school? Because isn't that really the skills? I mean, yes, you might use algebra or whatever you learn in other subjects, but you have to be able to communicate with people if you're in leadership or if you're selling products and services. Why don't they teach more of that in elementary school all the way up to high school?
I think there are schools who are doing a good job. I think the issue is it's not mandated at a federal, state level at this point, right? So you've got schools doing great work in silos, but majority of schools are so overburdened with trying to teach the core subjects, with trying to provide tutorials, with trying to catch up on the gaps, that these things fall by the wayside, but the impacts are so severe.
That's so true.
Lee, were you not mandated to take a foreign language in school?
I think we were mandated
We
to
were
take a foreign
too.
back in the
Spanish.
day.
I took one semester of Spanish and one semester of French, and I only know a few French words today. Most of them not good, but I know a few of them on there.
Well, I want to jump in, Claudine. This is important. You talk about the 51% for that socialization. It's kind of what you lean into. And I love the fact that you've trained 17,000 parents, 20,000 teachers, because when you're training a parent, you might be impacting 1 to 3 children. When you're training a teacher, you have just this exponential effect because they have a classroom of students. But I want to go back to, the school systems and the education system. You have to still quantify success. So you take algebra, you're taking a class, you're passing a test, and there's these minimum requisites that the pressure is put on the teachers. But if they're focusing on the socialization, how do you quantify that? And that's why it might get pushed to the wayside. What do you do about that?
So I think one of the things we try to do when we're partnering with any school-based org is we look at what is impeding the learning, right? So students constantly disrupting classroom instruction impedes learning. Students getting pushed out of classrooms because someone has to come and retrieve them because their behavior is disruptive impedes learning. Students being suspended for excessive amount of days impedes learning because that student's still responsible for the state test. And if they've missed several days, they're not going to perform as well, right? So it's understanding that these things actually go together. And when we continue to put Band-Aids on the problem, we're not actually solving it. So instead of individually assigning so many consequences, how do we also ensure, again, we're teaching these skills? So a lot of the schools we work with, they're implementing social emotional learning curriculum into the day, 30 to 40 minutes in the morning. That's how they start. And so imagine if I'm a kid and I'm coming to school with all my emotions from the world, the day, and home.
Oh, yeah.
And I have a moment to reset and check in, and someone asks me how I'm doing. And maybe I talk about self-love, and maybe I listen to a poem, or I do a meditation, and that allows me to start my day in a calmer, happier place.
Claudine, can we implement this across business?
I'm doing it, Lee, in the morning. I've done the Stuart Smalley. I'm smart enough.
Of course,
I'm good enough, and gosh darn it, people like me.
Absolutely.
And if I say that in the mirror, the day generally goes better.
It's a real thing. It's a real thing.
It is. There was a guy, Brian Tracy, who was a famous sales trainer over time, and he said that you could not stare in the mirror 10 times and say, I like myself, without smiling.
Yeah.
And, those positive affirmations have really great subconscious effects on your mind that a lot of people don't think about, or whatever it may be. Now, I want to ask you, because we talked about this pre-show. Look, my mom was a 5th grade school teacher, public. And, teachers can only do so much. But in the end, don't parents have some responsibility or accountability for their child at home and their education? And how do you hold parents accountable for what they need to be doing for their children?
Parents absolutely have a responsibility. They're their first teachers. They're their children's first teachers. And if we as parents are not supporting education, pushing education, then we'll see that same sentiment in our children. And so a lot of times, based on a parent's experience with education from their parents, that is how they will parent subconsciously, right? And so what we try to do is when we meet parents, we meet them where they are. We have very candid conversations. We talk really plainly about hard things, and we build trust. And so once we build that trust, then it's very easy to say, hey, these are some recommended things that we should do to support the social emotional learning of your kids. And we tell the kids to come into our sessions. And so they're co-planning and doing activities, and it just feels fun and it feels good. Because it's heart-centered work.
So you integrate the parents into the sessions with the children?
Absolutely.
So give me, if you don't mind, again, we speak to so many entrepreneurs that get to this level of success that you have, where you have things running well, but a lot of people need to listen to, our audience has to listen to the reality of, it didn't get this easy in the beginning. So give me some examples of maybe some mistakes that you made where you said, okay, I think we need to incorporate everybody together, right? And put the parents and the students. We've educated everybody.
You are not smarter than a 5th grader.
Yeah, that's fair. What are some of the challenges you ran into when you create this environment?
There's just so many challenges.
Yeah, Claudine's face, by the way.
I'm really trying to
if
hold
you're
it
just
together.
listening right now on air,
you have a plead the fifth. Have you ever had to outright yell at a parent?
No, but we have had to reset norms with a parent, right? So we'll start every session with here are the norms that we're going to use to self-govern ourselves in this space. But my responsibility as a facilitator is if a parent missteps is to call them up to a higher version of their parenting self. And my number one priority is ensuring the safety of the space isn't broken. Because if that safety is broken, then we lose vulnerability. However, I will say parents are more often on their best behavior. I have found more often than not, it is the tensions within schools that require me to uphold norms more frequently.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So that's it. Something you said which was key was trust.
Yeah.
And you really aren't going to be effective in all of your businesses and your education across the board if you don't have that trust. So maintaining that safe space is really, really important. So you find parents to be on their best behaviors. Are students a little more real and raw?
They are, but we also try to create an environment where, so for example, right, last week we did a session with about 50 parents on the concept of growth mindset, right? And so helping them understand, like, your son or daughter may be struggling with math right now, but that doesn't mean they're bad at math forever, right? If we adopt a growth mindset, we put some things in place, they can continue to grow in this area. And then we gave them an assessment that they had to do with their student, and they kind of rated their kid first, and their kid rated themselves, and then they talked and compared. That conversation was private. So everyone isn't privy to the conversation between the parent and the child and like their comparison, but we're coming back together whole group to kind of digest some of it. So I think that also like reduces some of the potential conflict that could happen there. And the kids end up really enjoying those spaces because their parents see them in a very different way.
Yeah, but the kids probably also see their parents being governed and policed by you.
Yeah, it's got to be fun. It's got to be fun.
Very fun, because I know they're not going to yell at me. I might not get hit today, right? I might not get slapped down today. I got someone monitoring what's going on.
They do get freedom to say more than they would normally say. I'm like, it's a safe space. Go ahead and tell your parents the truth.
They've got to love that. That's amazing.
Talk to us about this model, because you were a W-2 person at one point in your career.
Most of my life.
And you decided to make this leap, which is very scary, into entrepreneurship, because you basically go to zero. And how did you think about the model on how you were going to build it, how you were going to make money, and what did you learn in that first year in the business?
Ted, I approached all of that so ignorantly. I was a teacher. Like, I knew how to teach, and I was a leader at the time. I knew how to lead. I knew how to manage people. I knew how to relate. I didn't know anything about business. My gosh. And I'm actually grateful, because if I had known everything that it was going to take to start this business, I wouldn't have started it. It's so overwhelming, right? But I made so many mistakes, like I filed as one business entity. Apparently, along the way, I started making too much money. Didn't know that was a thing and you should switch. Figured that out the hard way.
Yep.
Being overtaxed, having to hire new staff and not being ready, like having more clients than I was prepared for. Because COVID happened and everybody was suddenly like, oh, wait, we need work on anti-racism and social emotional learning and teacher wellness and restorative practices. So it was like all the buckets that we focus on suddenly became really important. And I didn't anticipate that, but I didn't have a choice.
Well, I want to jump in. This is important, Claudine, because I know, Ted, you're a part of a leadership group, and I get to live through you and all of the anti-racism that you get to share with me and all the classes you've taken. And that's another topic here. Not only do you work on teacher wellness, social and emotional learning, the restorative practices, but there's a big topic, anti-racism training.
Yeah.
And it's really important. Could you speak to our listeners about that? Because you're dealing, and I speak of myself, I'm a white man over 50 years old, and I've lived in white privilege, so I have no vantage point as to what you train and how you train on that. And I would love for you to share more information.
Don't go through an Al Vivian course, I'll tell you that.
I know you did.
Caesar took it, and it's like, boy, at the end of the course, I came home that night, and Claudine, my wife, said, how was the program today? And I said, I just need like a couple hours to process
I need to be alone
what
right
happened
now.
today.
Yep. And I get to listen to this, Claudine, but again, I'm still ignorant. I have always joked, a good friend, Dr. Rashad Ritchie, who's been on our show, of course.
He actually spoke at Leadership Atlanta.
Oh, Rashad was on our show. We interviewed him on our program, and I remember he came on our program, and I'm going to speak of this very ignorantly, but Rashad's a good friend. He came on our program, and it was during the Black Lives Matter movement, and I said, hey, Rashad, I'm from Jersey. I'm colorblind, man. Like, I grew up going to a 7-Eleven, and there's an Asian gentleman, a black man or woman, 3 Indian guys, a white guy, and whatever else. And he said, Lee, that's admirable, but I need to educate you on the all of the inequities that have happened over the past 60 to 70 years and how generational wealth has not happened in the community. And he started going off, and I said, this is amazing. Again, I'm wide open to this. So I'm very ignorant, but I want you to speak in detail on the anti-racism training.
Absolutely. I also grew up in New England, so that resonates with me. Everything being a melting pot because we're so on top of each other.
But it also resonates with you with 7-Eleven, so that doesn't happen down here.
Absolutely. They don't
have them down here.
Yes.
Unfortunate.
But the culture is very different.
It's just
there.
different.
It's very different.
We are very much integrated and in community with each other. And I think that's just starkly different in the South in the way like things are zoned and mapped. And
very different. I'm half
noticeable.
my life, 26 years I moved down here, and I'm not going to say anything other than this is very different than the way that I grew up.
Yeah.
Yeah,
but
me too.
Please speak of that.
So what we try to do in supporting any org with an anti-racism approach is helping them to realize that we are past the time where saying you're not racist is like good enough. So it's easy for folks to say, well, I'm not racist. Well, what's your qualifier?
Right.
Tell me how you know.
Yeah.
And so being an anti-racist is taking it a step further and saying it's not good enough to just not be racist because people are dying when we're just not racist. Being an anti-racist means actually taking action to support marginalized people, right? So thinking about, Ted, and the work that you're doing with LEAD in Atlanta, you're putting yourself in communities that are incredibly diverse. You're learning and engaging with how to support the community that maybe typically you might not engage with. That's a concrete action that's incredibly anti-racist because it's centered in supporting people that may not be your immediate community, if that makes sense.
Well, it does because I'm one of the gentlemen in our class, Dr. James, he's the president of Morris Brown College. And I don't know if I would have really had a reason to go down to Morris Brown College. Right? Why would I be there? But I went and I saw Dr. James, and he got the accreditation back for the school.
Huge.
He was able to make it a partnership with Hilton Hotels, and they will now soon have the largest Black hospitality and management program in the country. And he talked to me, and we set up 10 scholarships because he's got a mission to make school free for kids and also make sure they get a job when they graduate school. And he's a majorly impressive guy, but otherwise I probably would not have run across him, you know?
I like you more now, Ted. I do. I'm not even going to lie. Because, again, it's like really dope, powerful anti-racist action. It's like I'm doing a thing, but then I'm also putting my money behind the thing.
Yes.
And that's life-changing for people on the other end.
Very much so.
Yeah.
You know, more than I would have thought. And, you know, I think that's people that are listening, that's part of the thing is that you got to be able to have conversations that make you feel uncomfortable.
Absolutely.
Because that's the only way to have good conversations. And you're exactly right. You have to get involved in things that you normally would not get involved in. Meet people that you would not normally meet, and your eyes will get open to what's happening here in our city.
You put some skin in the game.
Big time.
You know, I'm gonna go on a limb here. I've never said this before, but you know the term you've heard. I've lived in the term "ignorance is bliss," right? When you don't know what's going on, you're just living a happy life in general. But in this scenario, ignorance is not bliss. Ignorance is simply ignorant, and you need to take action on that matter. And I agree with him. When the opportunity presents itself, you have to lead into it.
Ignorance begets systemic racism. That makes it really easy for certain people to ignore.
Well, look, you know, I mean, you're bringing up a very important point here because you think about what you're doing. And a city like Atlanta that we learned along the way is the lowest on the totem pole for upward mobility.
I know.
Right? Lowest of all cities. And you think about what's happening in this city and us being able to make an impact. Education's such a big piece of this because if kids don't, at the early education level, aren't able to read, write, learn basic math, it so much affects them down the road, which is why
everything.
Yeah, these conversations are super important.
I have to ask one question, if I may. So, you know, when you're working in certain areas and you're working with the parents, you know, and please be clear for people out there that may not realize this, you know, not every young child has a parental figure. So I want to step back here because it sounded like, well, every child that I'm dealing with here, and we bring the parents in and it's all beautiful and we get to talk together, but I'm not sure, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but there's no way that every single child that you're dealing with and all the systems that you're working with has this parental figure that's available to come in and have these conversations. What do you do in those scenarios?
I think you're absolutely right. I think about, you know, my own school experience, and not everyone has like the traditional family, right? Mm-hmm. But I also think about one of our partner schools in this city and a grandmother named Miss Morgan that comes to every session because she's raising a 12-year-old and 14-year-old boy. And she's like, I need this because I'm 3 generations removed and I don't understand social media and I don't understand social emotional learning or mental health, but I know my babies need that. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of intergenerational support we see. And then there is a very real aspect of the work where, and this is something that all schools face, you may have, you know, upwards of 350 students. We're not always going to see 100% parent engagement. Yep. And so one of the things we try to do is like, how can we hook parents? Because we live in a society now where everything is so fast-paced. How do we make it convenient for parents? Is dinner going to be provided? Is there going to be some homework help for the students?
Yeah.
Are there some incentives? Because what we're competing with is like a normal, calm night in our routine, or doing something uniquely different, and then our entire day being altered. And for some parents, that's a really big deal.
How bad is, I don't want to say how bad, but just what's your vantage point on social media and the impact that it's had on kids? Because for us, I can remember the day still I got a busy signal when I called somebody. And to really get them, I'd have to do an emergency breakthrough. But there was no social media.
An emergency breakthrough.
You never did an emergency breakthrough?
Of course. That's an amazing
I think I got one of my
reference.
first dates like that. I had to call somebody and make an emergency breakthrough.
You have to call an emergency breakthrough. They chop into the line.
Oh, you call the operator. You say, I need an
operator?
emergency breakthrough. And they would break you through to the phone.
Wow.
No
And
one
then
ever taught me that.
I called. I said,
it's amazing.
That was a smooth move to get a date. That's how you get a date, Lee, is a smooth.
You definitely didn't want any friends with zeros in their numbers because of the whole dial. You just, oh my gosh, this is taking forever.
The rotary?
Oh, yeah, come back around. I agree.
Yeah, people think that that's like a different kind of like iPhone or something today. They don't know how to. If you take somebody today who's like 20 years old, they could not make a call.
Let me interject. I'm taking us off topic.
Those things are in museums.
I couldn't do one.
I was traveling with I have a 20 and 18, but I also have a 10-year-old. I'm the old dad, and I was traveling with a 10-year-old. I walked into a little coffee shop. They had an antique phone with the dial thing.
Yep.
And she goes, oh, Dad, I want to get this. I said, you're not getting anything until you pick that phone up and show me how you dial it. She had no clue. She didn't know how to, the holes, pushing it around.
Swipe,
I said,
no contact.
We're leaving now. You're not getting, what are you talking about? Then she pulled her phone out, and she looked up how to do it. Googled it.
Daggone kids.
And then I'm like, all right, you win. Well done. You get a coffee. There you go.
Good.
So I interrupted your question, Ted. We went off.
No, I think it's just fascinating here, just talking about this today. I want to know, you have so many courses that are on your website. How do people get in touch with you? How do they engage with you? Because what you're doing is so important. So many parents need it. Teachers, kids. How can they find you? How can they learn more about what you do?
We are absolutely easy to find. Our website is www.werestoremore.com. From that space, you can schedule a consultation. You can buy an online course. You can buy curriculum and start with your students right away. It's important for us that there isn't a barrier, and so there are different levels of entry based on where you are and what you're ready for. But I am always eager to sit down with organizations and schools and figure out what are the current problems and how can we support? Because most things are figure-outable. They're fixable, but you need someone who's savvy, who's solution-oriented, who has leadership potential and has the optimism and expertise to get it done.
So what would you say is the number one thing you think has to get fixed in the school systems here in Georgia? I know it's a tough question, but what do you think?
I know you put her on the spot. You put her on the spot.
This was not one of the questions y'all emailed over.
Yeah, here's the deal. While she's thinking about it, I'll give her time. I want to tell you that I'm in love with this woman, and she's a Yankee by heart because I have used the word figure-outable all the time.
It's a word.
And I've never heard of it before. I've said it and you said it, which is
I want to say that I don't know what to fix first, but I went one day to the middle school and I actually ate a school lunch.
That's pretty bad.
I don't remember last time I ate a school lunch. The mac and cheese was kind of congealed. It wasn't great, but
fair.
I remember how much, Lee, I look forward to pizza day. Mm-hmm. I could pay a little bit extra and get a square of pizza. It was the best.
You got a square of pizza because you were in Jersey.
Yeah, you could get a Sicilian out of there. Absolutely.
No, in Rhode Island we also had square pizza.
That as well. So I gave you some time to give us just your number one shot.
Quality, engaging instruction is a big part of the problem.
There you go.
Yeah.
I love it. All right, well, everybody go to werestoremore.com. That's where you get all the courses. You can talk to Claudine, hire her team. This is incredible stuff. Keep doing great work. Not only as an entrepreneur, but what you're doing here in Atlanta and the state of Georgia. We appreciate it.
I appreciate you.
All right, thanks so much. And thanks for listening to this episode of The Shrimp Tank.
I've been feeling like a shark